A single selfie taken in the wrong bedroom was about to detonate a billion-dollar empire. It wasn't a bomb or a market crash that brought down Titan William Harrington. It was a picture snapped on silk sheets he didn't own by a woman who wasn't his wife, and the woman he betrayed, Beatrice de la Roche. She didn't just get mad. She didn't just get even. She owned the Metropolitan Herald, the very newspaper that had built his public persona. And as dawn broke over New York City, she was about to make her husband's private shame the world's biggest headline. The Harrington penthouse on Park Avenue wasn't a home. It was a statement. A $40 million declaration of power suspended 80 stories above the city that William Harrington believed he owned. Every surface was polished to a mirror shine, Nero Machina marble floors, vast panes of glass that drank in the skyline, and chrome accents that caught the light with a cold, indifferent glint. It was a space designed to be photographed, not lived in. And in many ways, so was their marriage. Beatrice de la Roche. Harrington moved through the space with the quiet grace of a woman born to its stillness. She wasn't an accessory to William's life. She was its architect. It was her family's money, generations of old-world wealth that had provided the seed capital for his first risky tech venture. And it was her newspaper, the Metropolitan Herald, inherited from her father, that had polished his image from that of a ruthless corporate raider into a visionary philanthropist, a man of the people with $1 billion portfolio. Their union 15 years ago had been the society event of the year, a merger of old money and new ambition. Beatrice, with her sharp intellect, quiet dignity, and a spine of forged steel, was the perfect partner. She understood the intricate dance of power, the silent transactions that took place in boardrooms and at charity galas. She managed their life, their public image, and their social calendar with the precision of a military strategist. But for the past year, a chill had crept into the perfect climate-controlled air of the penthouse. It began subtly. William, who had always shared the minutiae of his day with her over dinner, became evasive. His phone, once left casually on the nightstand, was now perpetually angled away from her, its screen dark. Late nights at the office became more frequent, explained away by a hostile takeover or a difficult negotiation with the board in Singapore. Beatrice was no fool. She noticed the changes. The new cologne he wore a musky, almost aggressive scent called Oud Infini, so different from the clean vetiver fragrance she had bought him for years. The sudden interest in a fitness regimen that left him lean and hardened his tailor, working overtime to adjust the bespoke suits that now clung to a new frame. He was a man preening, but not for her. One Tuesday evening, the silence in the penthouse was particularly cavernous. William was yet again closing a deal. Beatrice sat in the living area, the city lights a glittering tapestry, below a first edition F. Scott Fitzgerald resting unread in her lap. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her head of security at the Herald, a stoic ex-Mossad agent named David Ben-Zion, whom she trusted implicitly. The text contained a single link and one sentence. "Mom, you need to see this. It's a private account, but we have our ways." Her finger hovered over the link, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. She knew with the chilling certainty of a woman who has willfully ignored 1,000 tiny cuts that this was the one that would sever the artery. She tapped the screen. It led to an Instagram profile. The handle was Krystal Life. The profile picture was of a young woman, impossibly glossy, with lips swollen into a permanent pout and eyes that held a look of brazen ambition. She was posing on the deck of a yacht, the Harrington Enterprises logo, subtly visible on a flag in the background. Beatrice's blood ran cold. It was their company's yacht, the Serenity from a leadership retreat in Monaco 2 months ago. She scrolled down. Post after post of a life lived in 5-star hotels on private jets with champagne flutes and designer bags. It was a curated highlight reel of a kept woman. Then she saw it. A post from 3 hours ago. The photo was a selfie. The woman Krystal was propped up on a mountain of pillows, a sly, triumphant smirk on her face. She was wearing one of William's shirts, a distinctive custom-made Charvet silk shirt, the one with the mother-of-pearl buttons. Beatrice had gifted it to him for their anniversary. But it wasn't the shirt that made Beatrice's breath catch in her throat, a sharp, ragged gasp that was the only sound in the vast, silent room. It was the background. The headboard was unmistakable, a towering piece of custom-milled oak, intricately carved, commissioned from an artist in Belgium. The bedside lamp, a delicate Murano glass sculpture, cast a soft, familiar glow. And on the wall, partially obscured, but still recognizable, was the corner of a painting, a Monet from her grandfather's collection. The photo was taken in her bed, in their bedroom. The one sanctuary she had believed was inviolable. For a long moment, Beatrice couldn't move. The phone felt like a block of ice in her hand. There was no screaming, no shattering of glass. The years of discipline of maintaining a placid exterior while navigating shark-infested waters took over. Her initial shock and the deep, searing pain of betrayal began to cool, crystallizing into something else entirely. It was hard, clear, and utterly cold. It was rage, but a quiet, calculating rage. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a desecration, a flag planted on conquered territory. The girl's smirk was a challenge, and William's carelessness, his sheer, unadulterated arrogance in allowing this to happen, was an insult that transcended mere adultery. He hadn't just cheated on her, he had disrespected her. He had forgotten who she was. Beatrice de la Roche. Harrington stood up, her movements fluid and deliberate. She walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the city. The lights of 1,000,000 lives blinked back at her. Down there, in one of those buildings, was the headquarters of the Metropolitan Herald. Her newspaper, her power. William thought the newspaper was a vanity project for her, a hobby to keep the rich wife occupied. He had never understood that for her it was a weapon. He had underestimated her. They both had. She took a screenshot of the photo, her hand steady. She forwarded it to David Ben-Zion with a new message. Find out everything about her. Name, age, address, family, blood type. Everything. And get the original high-resolution file of this image. I don't care how. Then she sent a second message to Arthur Finch, her grizzled 65-year-old editor-in-chief. Arthur, clear my schedule and the front page. We have a new headline. The betrayal was complete. The shock had passed. Now the strategy began. Beatrice wasn't going to cry. She was going to publish. Krystal Monroe believed in manifestation. She believed that if you wanted something badly enough, if you acted the part and projected the image, the universe would have no choice but to deliver. And Krystal wanted everything. She hadn't clawed her way out of a drab suburban existence in Ohio, shedding her past like a snakeskin to settle for mediocrity. She had come to New York with a suitcase full of ambition and a face and body she had painstakingly molded into a key designed to unlock a very specific type of door. William Harrington was that door. When she met him at a charity event she'd talked her way into, she saw him not as a man, but as a kingdom. He was 52, but a recent health kick had chiseled away the softness of age, leaving behind an aura of raw, predatory power. He radiated wealth, not in the quiet, assured way of Beatrice's old money circle, but in a loud, brilliant broadcast. The Patek Philippe on his wrist, the confident boom of his voice, the way other powerful men deferred to him, it was everything Krystal had ever dreamed of. Their affair began with the predictable beats of a billionaire's dalliance. Secret dinners in private rooms, at Daniel weekend trips to a discreet Hamptons beach house he kept for business, and a flood of gifts. Cartier bracelets, a Chanel wardrobe, a black Amex card with a seemingly limitless ceiling. Krystal played her part to perfection. She was adoring, uninhibited, and refreshingly uncomplicated compared to the cool, cerebral Beatrice. She made William feel young again, desired not for his name or his legacy, but for the virile power he still possessed. At least that's what she let him believe. But Krystal was growing impatient. 6 months of being a beautiful secret was starting to feel less like a glamorous affair and more like a long-term lease with no option to buy. She didn't want to be the dirty little secret. She wanted to be the new Mrs. Harrington. She wanted her picture in the society pages next to him, her name on the invitations, her reflection in the cold marble of that Park Avenue palace. She had heard the stories about Beatrice de la Roche, the Ice Queen, they called her, a woman who ran a newspaper, but was rarely pictured in it, who wielded her influence from the shadows. Krystal imagined her as a relic, a fragile piece of porcelain from another era that was bound to shatter. William spoke of his wife with a mixture of respect and weary obligation, like a monument he was legally required to maintain. "She doesn't understand the pressure I'm under," he'd complained to Krystal after a few glasses of Macallan 25. "Everything with her is about legacy appearances, the family name. There's no passion." Krystal provided the passion. She also provided an ultimatum, veiled in breathless whispers and feigned insecurity. "I just don't know where I stand, Billy," she'd murmur, tracing the lines on his palm. "I feel like a ghost in your life." The plan to take the selfie was not a spontaneous act of recklessness. It was a calculated move, a corporate raid on a personal scale. That afternoon, William had been bolder than ever. Beatrice was in London for a 2-day media summit. He had called Krystal his voice, thick with a schoolboy's thrill. "The castle is empty. Want a tour?" Walking into the Harrington penthouse was like stepping into another dimension. Krystal's own luxury condo, paid for by William, felt like a shoebox in comparison. The sheer scale of the place, the priceless art hanging casually on the walls, the silent, omnipresent view of the city, it was intoxicating. This, she thought, was the throne room. But it was the master bedroom that truly took her breath away. It was vast, yet intimate. The scent in the room was subtle and expensive, a blend of lavender and old paper Beatrice's scent. It was the scent of class, of history, and Krystal hated it. It felt like a judgment. While William was in his enormous walk-in closet, taking a call from Tokyo, Krystal saw her opportunity. This was the inner sanctum, the one place that was unequivocally theirs. Conquering this space felt like the final decisive victory. She shed her dress, letting it pool on the floor like a discarded skin. She slipped on one of William's silk shirts from a drawer, the fabric cool against her skin. It felt like she was wearing his power. She climbed onto the bed, the thread count of the sheets so high they felt like water. She opened the camera app on her phone. She angled her face, pushing her hair back, letting the shirt fall open just enough to hint at what lay beneath. In the background, she made sure to capture the distinctive headboard, and the edge of the famous painting William had once mentioned was Beatrice's pride and joy. She took a dozen shots, adjusting the angle, the pout, the lighting. She finally settled on one where her expression was a perfect mix of sensuality and smug triumph. It was a digital scent marking. It said, "I was here. I sleep in her bed. I wear his shirt. I am winning." She posted it not to her main public Instagram, but to her Finsta, the private account with only a few hundred followers, her closest friends, other aspiring socialites, and a few key people she knew were connected to the city's gossip circles. It was designed to leak. She wanted the whispers to start to create a groundswell of rumor that would eventually force William's hand. She imagined the rumor reaching Beatrice in London, a poison dart flying across the Atlantic, forcing a confrontation, a messy divorce, and finally Krystal's ascendance. "What are you doing?" William's voice startled her. He was standing in the doorway of the closet, his phone still in hand, a frown on his face. "Just capturing the moment," she said, giving him a sultry smile. "Making a memory." He looked at the phone in her hand, then at the bed, and a flicker of unease crossed his face. "Krystal, maybe that's not a good idea. That account of yours." "Don't worry, Billy," she cooed, patting the mattress beside her. "It's private. It's just for my friends. It's our little secret." He hesitated for a moment longer, the seasoned businessman in him warring with the flattered ego of a man half his age. The ego won. He broke into a grin, dismissing his own concern. "All right, but come here. I've got a better memory for us to make." As he walked toward the bed, Krystal felt a surge of victory. The trap was set. The photo was out there, a digital time bomb ticking away. She was no longer the ghost in his life. She had a face, a name, and now proof of her place in his world. She believed she was a master strategist, a player in the great game. She had no idea she was merely a pawn, and she had just handed the Queen all the ammunition she would ever need. The headquarters of the Metropolitan Herald occupied a stark modernist tower in Midtown, a monument of steel and glass that stood in sharp contrast to the old-world stone of the de la Roche family mansion. For Beatrice, however, this building was her true home, the place where her power was tangible. She arrived shortly after 10 p.m., sweeping through the lobby with a quiet intensity that made the night shift security guards stand a little straighter. She didn't go to her spacious top-floor office. Instead, she took the elevator to the 34th floor, the beating heart of the newspaper, the newsroom. Even at this late hour, it was a hive of controlled chaos. The hum of computers, the murmur of reporters on the phone, the distant glow of television screens broadcasting global news. But Beatrice walked directly to the glass-enclosed office in the center of the room, known to the staff as the War Room. It was the office of her editor-in-chief, Arthur Finch. Arthur was a throwback to another era of journalism. He was a rumpled, white-haired man who still wore suspenders and had ink stains on his fingers, despite the industry's shift to digital. He had been her father's most trusted editor, and had become Beatrice's staunchest ally and mentor. He was one of the few people who was not intimidated by her wealth or her name. He was looking at the photo on his monitor when she entered. He didn't stand up, just swiveled in his chair, his expression grim. "David Ben-Zion sent this to me. B, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, Arthur." "Be ready," Beatrice said, her voice devoid of emotion. She placed her handbag on the corner of his cluttered desk. "I want the front page." Arthur took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He had seen Beatrice through corporate battles, political endorsements, and hostile takeover attempts of the paper. He had never seen her like this. She was preternaturally calm, her face a mask of porcelain resolve. It was the calm at the eye of a hurricane. "The front page," he repeated slowly. "B, this is a domestic matter. We're a serious newspaper, not the National Enquirer. Is the CEO of one of the country's largest tech conglomerates, a man who sits on presidential advisory boards and champions family values in public speeches, having an affair not a matter of public interest, she countered, her voice sharp. Is hypocrisy not newsworthy? It's your husband, Arthur said gently. This will be a personal and professional firestorm. The board of Harrington Enterprises will come after us with everything they have. William he will try to destroy you. Let him try, Beatrice said, her gaze unwavering. He used my family's money to build his empire and my newspaper to build his reputation. I am simply reclaiming my investment. She gestured to the screen. That woman, Krystal Monroe, is 26 years old, an aspiring influencer from Canton, Ohio. David is compiling a full dossier. She has been living in a condo in Tribeca, owned by a shell corporation that traces back to Harrington Enterprises' offshore accounts for the past 6 months. This isn't a fling, Arthur. It's a business arrangement. Arthur stared at the photo again. The girl's smug face, the opulent background, and the photo, taken this evening, in my bedroom, while I was on a flight back from London. The final detail hung in the air between them. It was the detail that tipped the scales from a private tragedy to a public execution. It was an act of profound disrespect and invasion. Arthur leaned back, the old leather of his chair, groaning in protest. He understood. This wasn't a wife scorned. This was a monarch whose throne room had been defiled. What's the headline? He asked, his voice now all business. I have it right here, Beatrice said. She pulled a piece of paper from her bag and slid it across the desk. Arthur put his glasses back on and read it. His eyebrows shot up. Harrington's home wrecker, inside the billionaire's bedroom. Below the headline was a mock-up. The centerpiece was the selfie blown up, crisp and damning. To the side, a smaller file photo of William Harrington smiling benevolently at a charity function. The juxtaposition was brutal. My God, Bea, Arthur whispered. This is a declaration of war. It is, she confirmed. I need our best investigative team on this. I want a full profile on Krystal Monroe. I want a deep dive into the shell corporation that pays for her condo. I want a timeline of William's late nights, cross-referenced with her social media activity. I want quotes from anonymous sources inside his company, talking about his distractions. I want this story to be ironclad, backed by sources and facts. We will report on the affair, but we will frame it as a story of corporate malfeasance and hypocrisy. The photo is the hook, the evidence that makes it undeniable. Arthur was already thinking like an editor, his mind racing. The legal team will have a fit. William will sue for libel invasion of privacy. He can't sue for libel if it's true, Beatrice cut in. And as for privacy, he lost that right when his mistress posted photographic evidence from my home on a public platform. Our lawyers will argue that his position as a public figure and CEO makes his conduct a matter of legitimate public concern. And besides, she added with a flicker of a deadly smile, I own the lawyers. For the next 2 hours, the war room lived up to its name. Beatrice and Arthur, joined by the paper's top legal counsel, and the head of the investigative unit, planned the assault with meticulous precision. They were no longer husband and wife editor and owner. They were commander and general, mapping out a campaign. They decided to run the story in 48 hours in the Thursday edition. It would give them enough time to build the accompanying articles, to fact-check every detail, and to prepare for the inevitable blowback. It would also ensure William would be blindsided. He would be at a major tech conference in San Francisco, giving a keynote address on corporate ethics in the digital age. The irony was too perfect to resist. As the plan solidified, a young photo editor was summoned. I need you to clean up this image, Beatrice instructed, pointing to the selfie on the screen. "Enhance the resolution. I want every detail to be crystal clear. I want the world to see the pattern on the headboard, the reflection in the glass of the lamp, and most of all the smug little smile on her face." The young editor, wide-eyed, simply nodded and got to work. As dawn approached, casting a grey light over the city, the work was done. The machine was in motion. The front page was designed, the stories assigned, the legal defences prepared. Arthur walked Beatrice to the elevator. The newsroom was quieter now, the hum of the morning edition being put to bed. "Are you sure about this, Bea?" he asked one last time, his voice laced with genuine concern for the woman he had known since she was a girl. "Once this is done, there's no going back. This will change everything." Beatrice turned to him, her face illuminated by the soft light of the elevator call button. The mask of composure was still there, but for a fleeting second, Arthur saw a flicker of the profound pain beneath it. "He changed everything, Arthur," she said, her voice a low, steady whisper. "When he brought that woman into my home. I'm just setting the record straight." The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, a solitary, elegant figure in a cage of steel. As the doors slid shut, her reflection stared back at her, the wife of William Harrington. By Thursday, she would be his widow in all but name. The 48 hours before the Thursday edition dropped were the longest and shortest of Beatrice's life. She operated on pure adrenaline, fueled by black coffee and a cold, burning sense of purpose. She did not return to the Park Avenue penthouse. Instead, she had a cot set up in a small, unused office adjacent to the newsroom. To be anywhere near William's things, to smell his scent on the pillows, was unthinkable. She needed the sterile, functional environment of the Herald to keep her focus sharp. William called her, of course. His first call from San Francisco was breezy, oblivious. "Just landed, sweetheart. The air here is electric. Wish you could have come." "I'm sure it is," Beatrice replied, her voice a perfect imitation of her usual calm demeanor. "Break a leg with the keynote." The lie tasted like ash in her mouth, but it was a necessary deception. The element of surprise was paramount. The newsroom was buzzing with a secret electric energy. Only the core team, Arthur, the lawyers, the investigative reporters, knew the true nature of the Project H that was consuming the paper's top resources. The rest of the staff just knew a massive, sensitive story was about to break. Rumors flew, guessing at everything from a political scandal to a Wall Street implosion. No one suspected the truth was aimed at the husband of the woman who signed their paychecks. David Benzion's team worked miracles. They procured the original high-resolution file of the selfie from one of Krystal's friends on the private account, a rival influencer who was all too happy to sell her out for a price. They unearthed Krystal's entire digital footprint, old modeling photos, blog posts from her teenage years, detailing her dreams of marrying a rich man, even a deleted tweet from a year ago that read, "Playing the long game. NYC better be ready for me." The investigative team, led by a Pulitzer-winning journalist named Michael Chen, connected the dots with terrifying efficiency. The shell corporation that owned Krystal's condo, Azure Holdings LLC, was traced through a labyrinth of offshore banks from the Cayman Islands to a holding company directly managed by William Harrington's personal CFO. They found receipts for flights, hotels, and jewelry, all paid for from the same slush fund. Beatrice reviewed every word, every photograph, every piece of evidence. This couldn't be a hysterical rant. It had to be a surgical piece of journalism. The tone had to be objective, factual, and all the more devastating for it. The central story focused on the potential misuse of corporate funds and the hypocrisy of a public figure. The selfie was the emotional core, the visual proof that made the dry financial data impossible to ignore. On Wednesday afternoon, the final proof of the front page was brought to her. She spread it out on a large light table. There it was. Krystal Monroe's face, blown up to fill half the page, her smirk a mixture of arrogance and vanity. The headline screamed in bold 72-point font Harrington's home wrecker, and there in the corner was William, looking every bit the distinguished corporate statesman. It was perfect. That evening, as the printing presses in the basement of the Herald building began to run, the low, rhythmic rumble felt like the sound of an approaching army. Beatrice stood at a window overlooking the city, watching the first delivery trucks being loaded with bundles of the Thursday edition. Each bundle was a bomb ready to detonate at newsstands and on doorsteps across the city at dawn. She thought of her father, a stern, unflinching newspaper man who had taught her that the press was not a toy, but a sacred trust. "You don't use it to settle personal scores, Beatrice," he had once told her. "You use it to hold the powerful accountable." "He is powerful, Papa," she whispered to the glass, "and I am holding him accountable." She knew some would call this a vile, personal vendetta. They would say she had stooped to the lowest level, airing her dirty laundry in public. But they didn't understand. William hadn't just broken their marriage vows. He had built an empire on her foundation and used his power to lie, to deceive, and to mock the very principles he espoused. This wasn't just her laundry, it was his, and it was filthy. Her phone rang. It was William calling for his nightly check-in before he went to sleep. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice was steady. "Hi, William." "Hey, just wrapping up. Big day tomorrow. You wouldn't believe the buzz here. Everyone's talking about my keynote." "I'm sure they are," she said. "Get some rest. You'll want to be fresh for your big day." "Will do. Love you," he said the words, automatic, meaningless. "Goodbye, William," she replied, and ended the call. As she turned from the window, Arthur was standing in the doorway of her temporary office. He held 2 glasses and a bottle of expensive single malt scotch. "The trucks have left," he said simply. "The first wave is on its way to the airports and train stations. By 3 a.m. it will be everywhere." He handed her a glass. She took it, the weight of it feeling heavy and final in her hand. They stood in silence for a moment, the rumble of the presses below them, a constant, deep vibration. "To the free press," Arthur said, raising his glass in a solemn toast. Beatrice looked at him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. She raised her own glass. "No, Arthur," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "To accountability." They drank. The scotch burned a trail down her throat, a fire to match the one she was about to unleash on the world. The paper was printed. The story was set. There was no turning back now. All that was left was to wait for the dawn and for the explosion. Dawn in San Francisco breaks cool and misty, a gentle counterpoint to New York's aggressive sunrise. William Harrington woke at 5:00 a.m., PST, in his suite at the Four Seasons, feeling on top of the world. Today was the culmination of a year's work, his keynote on the new corporate conscience. He had a routine lemon water, a 30-minute Peloton ride, and then a scan of the morning's news on his tablet. He opened the digital portal to the Metropolitan Herald first. It was a habit born of vanity. He liked to see how Beatrice's paper was covering his industry, his world. The home page took a second to load, and then it filled the screen. For a full 10 seconds, his brain refused to process what he was seeing. It was a cognitive failure, a system crash. There was the face of Krystal. Not just any photo, but that photo, the one from his own bedroom. It was huge, impossibly detailed. And the headline, Harrington's Home Wrecker. His own name next to that picture. In his wife's newspaper. The blood drained from his face. The tablet slipped from his numb fingers and clattered onto the floor. He lunged for it, his hands shaking as he scrolled. It wasn't just the front page. It was a full multi-page spread. There was Michael Chen's byline on an exhaustive investigation into Azure Holdings LLC. There was a sidebar on Krystal Monroe, complete with quotes from former friends in Ohio. There was a timeline of his travel juxtaposed with her Instagram posts. It was a meticulously researched, expertly executed assassination. And the publisher was his own wife. His phone began to vibrate, a furious, incessant buzzing on the nightstand. The screen lit up with the name of his company's chairman of the board. He ignored it. It buzzed again. His CFO. Ignored. A third time. The head of PR. He stumbled into the bathroom and stared at his reflection in the mirror. The face looking back was not that of a titan of industry. It was the face of a fool. A trapped, panicked animal. The sheer diabolical brilliance of it hit him like a physical blow. Beatrice hadn't screamed or cried. She had gathered evidence, marshaled her forces, and used her most powerful asset to utterly humiliate him on the most important day of his professional year. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in New York, the city was waking up to the story. On newsstands from the financial district to the Upper East Side, the Herald's front page was a stark, unavoidable spectacle. In subways, people held up the paper, their faces a mixture of shock and glee. The story spread online like wildfire. Whoa, Harrington home wrecker becoming the #1 trending topic on Twitter before the stock market even opened. In her Tribeca condo, Krystal Monroe woke up not to a call from William, but to the sound of her phone exploding with notifications. Her first thought was that she had gone viral, that her soft launch of the affair had worked better than she could have ever imagined. She opened Instagram, a giddy smile on her face. The smile vanished instantly. Her face was everywhere, but she wasn't being celebrated. She was being vilified. The comments on her photos were a torrent of digital poison, gold digger, home wrecker, trash. News vans were already parked outside her building. Paparazzi were swarming the entrance. She frantically called William. The call went straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She tried a third, fourth, fifth time. Nothing. Panic began to set in. This wasn't the plan. She was supposed to be the romantic heroine in this story, the woman he couldn't live without. Instead, the newspaper, his wife's newspaper, had painted her as a cheap, calculating tramp. Beatrice hadn't been a passive victim. She had been the executioner, and Krystal was the face on the chopping block. She was not the winner. She was the weapon that had been used against William, and now she was being discarded. Back in San Francisco, William Harrington was in full-blown crisis mode. He had his PR team on a conference call, their voices a frantic babble of damage control and holding statements. "What do you mean, no comment is our best option?" he roared into the phone. "My face is on the front page of a major newspaper, next to that woman, in my own house." Bill, his chairman, cut in his voice, cold as ice. The story isn't just about the affair. It's about the Shell Corporation, the misuse of funds. The stock is projected to open down 15%. The Ethics Committee of the board has already scheduled an emergency meeting. Your keynote is cancelled. You need to get on a plane and come back to New York. Now. The line went dead. William stood in the silent hotel room, the carefully constructed edifice of his life crumbling around him. The speech on corporate conscience lay on the desk, its words now a bitter, laughable irony. Beatrice, meanwhile, was holding her morning editorial meeting at the Herald. She was dressed impeccably, in a steel-grey Armani suit, her demeanour crisp and professional. She addressed the room, her voice calm and measured. "As you are all aware," she began, "this morning's edition contains a difficult but necessary story involving a prominent public figure. Our duty, as always, is to the truth and to holding power accountable without fear or favour. We will continue to follow this story and its fallout with the same journalistic integrity." No one dared to meet her eye for more than a second. They understood the unspoken message. This was not a personal drama playing out on their pages. This was the new mission statement of the Metropolitan Herald: fearless, unflinching, and utterly ruthless. Arthur Finch watched her from the back of the room, a sense of awe mixing with a sliver of fear. He had unleashed the dragon. Beatrice de la Roche had not just taken revenge. She had immolated her old life and was rising from the ashes, reborn in the fire of the printing press. The story wasn't just on the front page. She was the story, and she was in complete control. William Harrington's private jet touched down at Teterboro Airport in a shroud of disgrace. He had spent the 6-hour flight from San Francisco in a state of oscillating fury and terror, fielding frantic calls and watching his company's stock price plummet in real time. By the time he landed, Harrington Enterprises had lost over $3 billion in market value. He bypassed the waiting town car, which he assumed would be besieged by paparazzi, and took a discreet heli-taxi into Manhattan. He needed a confrontation. He needed to see Beatrice, to unleash the torrent of rage that had been building inside him. He didn't go to the penthouse. He knew she wouldn't be there. He went straight to the belly of the beast, the headquarters of the Metropolitan Herald. He strode into the lobby, his face a thunderous mask, ignoring the stunned gasps of the employees. He didn't need a visitor's pass. He took the executive elevator straight to the top floor to Beatrice's office. Her executive assistant, a woman who had worked for her for a decade, rose to block his path. "Mr. Harrington, I don't think—" "Get out of my way, Janet," he snarled, pushing past her and bursting through the double doors of Beatrice's office. Beatrice was standing by the window looking out over the city. She turned as he entered, her expression unreadable. She wasn't angry or tearful or triumphant. She was simply calm. It was the most unnerving thing he had ever seen. "You—" he roared, his voice echoing in the large, quiet space. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed me. You've destroyed the company." For what a petty, jealous fit of rage. "Was it petty, William?" Beatrice asked, her voice soft but laced with steel. "Or was it precise? Please sit down. There are a few things we need to discuss." "I'm not sitting down," he yelled, pacing in front of her desk like a caged lion. "I'm going to sue you, the paper, every journalist who put their name on that trash. I'll own this place by the time I'm done with you." Beatrice walked calmly to her large mahogany desk and picked up a slim, leather-bound folder. She held it out to him. "Before you do that, you might want to look at this." He snatched it from her hand and threw it open on the desk. Inside were not legal threats, but photographs. Dozens of them. Clear, professionally taken surveillance photos. There was William and Krystal kissing on a street corner. William and Krystal going into the Tribeca condo. William and Krystal on the deck of the Serenity in Monaco. The dates and times were stamped meticulously in the corners. "My security team has been tracking you for 8 months. William," Beatrice said, her voice still unnervingly placid. "Ever since you started expensing client dinners at restaurants that don't have private rooms, I have a complete record of your affair. Every hotel, every gift, every dollar you siphoned from the corporate accounts to fund your indiscretion." William stared at the photos, his rage beginning to curdle into a cold dread. This was not a spontaneous act of revenge. This was a long, calculated campaign. The newspaper story, Beatrice continued, was a masterpiece of misdirection, a grand public spectacle. While you, your board, and the entire world were distracted by the sordid tale of your mistress and her selfie, my real attorneys were quietly filing these. She gestured to a thick stack of documents on the corner of her desk. That is a petition for divorce, citing the infidelity clause, Clause 11b, in our prenuptial agreement. You may not remember it, but our lawyers were very specific. It stipulates that in the event of public adultery that brings shame or ridicule upon the family name, the terms of the asset division change dramatically. She let that sink in. William felt the floor drop out from beneath him. The prenup. He'd signed it 15 years ago, thinking it was a mere formality. And this, she said, tapping a second stack of documents, is an emergency injunction which was granted by a judge an hour ago, based on the evidence of corporate embezzlement published in my newspaper. It freezes your personal assets, William, all of them. Your bank accounts, your trading portfolio, your access to the company credit lines. It seems the court agreed that a man who uses shareholder money to rent a girlfriend can't be trusted not to hide his wealth during a divorce proceeding. William finally collapsed into a chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a chilling understanding. He had walked into what he thought was a brawl, only to find out he'd been in checkmate for months. The selfie hadn't been the cause of his downfall. It had simply been the trigger. The excuse Beatrice needed to pull all the levers she had already put in place. The public humiliation was the smoke screen for the financial evisceration. "Why be?" he whispered, the fight gone from his voice. "Why do it this way, so public, so brutal?" For the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed Beatrice's face. It wasn't anger. It was a profound, weary sadness. "Because you didn't just betray me, William," she said, looking him directly in the eye. "You belittled me. You stood on the foundation I provided you in the house my family paid for, and you let that girl mock me in my own bed. You thought I was just a quiet, respectable wife. A part of the scenery. You forgot that I am a de la Roche. My father built this newspaper to hold arrogant men like you accountable. I simply honored his legacy." She walked back to the window, her back to him, signaling the end of the conversation. "The board of Harrington Enterprises will be calling you soon," she said. "They'll ask for your resignation. I suggest you give it to them. It will be the only graceful move you have left." William sat there, a titan reduced to rubble, surrounded by the evidence of his own folly. He had been so busy playing a game with his mistress that he never realized he was a piece in his wife's far more complex and far more devastating game. He hadn't just lost his wife and his mistress. He had lost his company, his fortune, and his name. And it had all been orchestrated by the one person he had fatally underestimated. In the months that followed the detonation, the dust settled to reveal a landscape irrevocably altered. William Harrington, stripped of his CEO title and locked in a brutal divorce battle where his assets were frozen and his leverage was nil, became a pariah. The business magazines that once lauded him as a visionary now ran lengthy post-mortems on his catastrophic fall from grace, detailing his hubris and ethical lapses. He was forced to sell off his shares in Harrington Enterprises at a fraction of their former value to cover his legal fees and the eventual divorce settlement. He was no longer a king. He was a cautionary tale, whispered at cocktail parties and in boardrooms. Krystal Monroe's 15 minutes of fame curdled into a lifetime of notoriety. Labeled the billionaire's bedroom wrecker, she was a toxic brand. The endorsement deals she dreamed of never materialized. The doors to high society that had briefly cracked open were slammed shut and bolted. She was hounded by paparazzi for a few weeks, then abandoned by them as the world moved on to the next scandal. She eventually retreated from New York, her luxe life. A bitter memory, returning to a world far from the Park Avenue penthouse she had so briefly occupied. She had gambled for the kingdom and lost everything, not even getting to keep the trinkets. The condo, the car, the credit cards, all assets of the frozen Harrington empire were seized. But for Beatrice de la Roche, it was a renaissance. The story had done exactly what she had intended. Circulation and digital subscriptions for the Metropolitan Herald skyrocketed. The paper, once seen as a respectable but somewhat staid publication, was suddenly the most talked about news source in the country. It was hailed for its fearless investigative journalism and its willingness to speak truth to power, even when that power was in its own house. Beatrice had gambled the paper's reputation, and in doing so had forged a new, more powerful one. She leaned into the new identity. She poached top investigative talent from rival papers, greenlit ambitious long-form projects, exposing corruption in politics and finance, and poured resources into their international bureaus. She became a champion of the press, a feared and respected figure who wielded her influence with surgical precision. She was no longer Beatrice Harrington, the billionaire's wife. She was Beatrice de la Roche, the publisher of the Metropolitan Herald. 6 months after the story broke, she stood in the newly renovated newsroom. The space was brighter, more modern, with a massive digital screen on one wall displaying real-time analytics and breaking news from around the globe. It was a physical manifestation of the paper's transformation. Arthur Finch approached her, holding the first copy of the Sunday magazine. The cover was a stark, powerful photograph of 3 female whistleblowers who had exposed a massive fraud scheme at a Wall Street investment bank, a story the Herald had spent months developing. The headline was simple: "The Truth Tellers." "It's a hell of a cover, B," Arthur said, a deep respect in his voice. "It's a hell of a story," she replied, taking the magazine from him. She ran her hand over the glossy cover. She had paid a high personal price for her victory. The penthouse was sold, its cold perfection now a memory. Her personal life was the subject of endless speculation. But in the quiet moments alone in her ancestral family home upstate, she knew she had made the only choice she could. William had forced her to choose between being a victim and being a queen. She had chosen the throne. Her old life was a story that had ended. The newspaper was the story that was just beginning. She looked up at the bustling newsroom, at the reporters chasing leads, and the editors shaping narratives. She had taken the worst moment of her life and forged it not into a weapon of revenge, but into a shield for the truth. Her husband's private shame had become the headline that redefined her entire public legacy. It was a brutal, painful, and ultimately liberating transaction. She had lost a marriage, but had found herself not in the reflection of a powerful man, but in the bold black ink of the front page. And that was a headline she could live with. Beatrice's story is a masterclass in revenge, a chilling reminder that hell hath no fury like a woman with controlling interest in a major media conglomerate. She transformed her deepest personal pain into an act of public accountability, using the power of the press not just to expose a cheating husband, but to dismantle the corrupt system that enabled him. But the question remains, was her response a stroke of genius, a calculated move by a brilliant strategist? Or did she cross a line, sacrificing journalistic ethics for a personal vendetta. What do you think? Was Beatrice a hero or a villain in this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you love stories of power drama and epic twists, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable tales. Don't miss what's coming next.